Sure. Morning, everybody. My name is Byron Lopez. I'm Director of Operational Technology over at Kilroy. And we're a Neeve customer now. Just to give you a background on Kilroy, Kilroy is a real estate investment trust. Very interesting, about 100, 120 buildings in the portfolio that are currently under our management. We're about 8 years in this journey. So the project for us started about 8 years ago. And that's when I first became the manager in the role. I was running other IT operations, but it was dedicated that I would be taking over support, providing support for the construction team, security, sustainability, facilities management, even our legal teams, because our legal teams were dealing with requests from leasing saying, I want access to your BMS in real time to be able to see the points and what's going on from a tenant. And our legal team would say, yes, maybe, maybe not. So we had to become a resource for all the different departments. So 8 years ago, that's where we started the project. And it was initially just HVAC controls. And that opened up the can of worms for everything that now exists within a building operation system.
Byron was one of our earliest adopters. We kind of partnered with him. A lot of the functionality we have has evolved from his input. So we worked with him to put some of our first devices in. It's called a secure edge, and it's providing kind of the basic cybersecurity for the OT side, remote access for all vendors, kind of pushed through a single choke point, as well as SD-WAN functionality. And then we've just started now kind of testing the edge compute piece. We're able to run edge applications on the same device. It's already connected to the network, so it kind of streamlines some of the deployment
Yes.
of that.
So one of the things we did is we created an enterprise level OT network, right? What we said is go back and what we call it is a building operational network, right? So the building operational network runs every piece of infrastructure that supports, maintains, and operates the site, whether that is irrigation and just irrigation valves and smart valving, all the way to facial recognition, mobile credentialing, access controls, everything that is brought in at the different layers. And it all starts from the foundation. So we consider this bond to be our foundation, right? Whatever sits on top are the bells and whistles. But having that foundation of switches that you can manage, that you can create VLANs on, that you can say, I'm going to put ICE on there so that somebody connects in there, it's not going to get an IP address. That's just statically setting IP address, right? One of the big things that we found in the past was that vendors were just putting in routers and opening up a Wi-Fi network and saying, yeah, I'm going to connect to it, and then not realizing that admin was the password for that, and people were just connecting to it. Or they would have, Wi-Fi streaming on the same network as the BMS, so whoever was trying to get to Netflix can, do a simple scan of the network and figure out what else was on there. So what we actually created was a network foundation that would require all of our buildings to operate under the system. So 120 buildings had to be fully retrofitted. All non-managed switches had to be ripped out. The teams had to start budgeting for services like Neeve, services through Cisco, anything that helped protect the building from an IT perspective, but also understanding that we couldn't mandate that for every single device, or we had to have flexibility, right? There's some devices that are still LG that still require flash to be able to operate the BMS. I mean, what the heck is that, right? And the IT side, you see something that's no longer supported, you chuck it out. And the building, you can't tell somebody to rip out equipment because that might be $500,000. So we had to balance that piece between IT's needs, OT needs, engineering, facilities, and the budget for the property. Because at the end of the day, the budget comes from the building, and they have to pay for it. So as you guys can see, we've actually created a full structure and diagram list, and what we call the Kilroy matrix. We give that to our teams and say, these are the only devices that you can work with when you're deploying a camera. These are the only switches that are allowed to be on your network. If you're running, a point-to-point connection, it has to come between our SD-WAN. So we actually manage our cloud solutions as well. So if we work with a partner that has a cloud application, we have to deploy the Neeve Edge Connect now. But basically, we require our vendors to say, if you want to host our data, in order for us to be able to have that data chain of custody, it has to flow through our tunnels. You can't just tell me open port this on this fire. No, it has to be a connected tunnel directly from us. We're very used to the north-south traffic, right? Traffic going from the building to the cloud. We also have east-west traffic, buildings talking to each other, right? Because it does make sense that we are able to then replace hardware. You used to see a bunch of servers at each building. Now we can virtualize that, put that in our data center, spin up an environment that we can now connect all of our SD-WAN tools to, and then reduce that cost. So it's one of the things that we've been able to get done pretty quickly. This is something that I'm actually very proud of because it's not actually developed by our team, but it's by our GC. So our general contractor was given the guidelines on the first projects. We told this is how we want to do it. This is how we want to develop. And now they're coming back proactively and telling us, okay, how does this look, right? This is the first stab at it. They're not IT people. They're infrastructure and construction people, right? But they're the ones who are now helping us develop the standards from the beginning because we know what we like. It also it's helpful that we're investing $500 million into these buildings and they get a big chunk of that money. But they are now starting the process of saying, we think your IDF closets should be here. We think we should be running fiber from this building to this campus. We think we should be putting these types of switches, right? So they will follow the guidelines that we provide and able to develop a structure with them to be able to work. So our new campus is 26, 30 plus switches, fully managed devices, under control with ICE, right? Thousands of devices are connecting, VLAN for access, cameras, water detection, methane detection, elevator controls. We even have wet elevators, which means those are for animals. So you're using a lab environment, those elevators are only able to have animals and other control substance in there. So if it detects a human, it has to notify security, which then has to notify engineering. So all those devices have to flow through our environment, and they require very specific city regulations. So we are now able to tell the city, yeah, we can put that in there without an issue. And by the way, we can give you guidance and we can give you remote access so that you can verify that we're not just saying we do it. We actually do it through this process. So
Well, do you have to rip and replace like access control, things like that? Or is that not
we do. So having the foundation has allowed us to be able to play the game of vendor A, you suck so terribly that I'm not going to give you anything anymore, which has happened, and say I'm going to go with vendor B because the foundation that's there, the switches, the infrastructure, the cabling, the network, allows me to be able to rip you out and put somebody else in place. It also allows me to do great pilots because then I can have two sites that have the same foundation, different vendors that are competing for same services, and then be able to say what is really effective. Not have a difference in infrastructure, but have a difference in the vendors and see really how they're playing, and be able to pilot projects in 6 months instead of having it be a year and a half, 2 years.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I know. Yeah, you were able to obviously decrease the cybersecurity risk.
Yep.
You guys are managing all this with.
Yeah, we have two guys running all this.
Yeah.
120 buildings. There is, one network guy that is oversight of everything. We do have consultants or facility engineers are the ones who are in the buildings running the day-to-day operations. But for network infrastructure, it's basically two people overseeing the devices, managing connectivity. I know you guys said IP addresses in 4 weeks. Was that right? Yeah. No, I mean, it's probably like a day or two, but, well, but it really goes back to the management of it, right? And it's also a process. At the beginning, it was closer to 4 weeks because it was somebody didn't know how to do the process. And Drew, you actually got nail on the head, right? The governance piece. Our engineering team at the beginning hated our guts. What helped us was beers, pizza every other week, having food delivered to them, and then they were like, all right, if I talk to Byron, he's going to send me food next week, so maybe I'll do that. So it became a process where they know, and they won't go rogue. They won't go out and select a vendor and buy something because now they know that they'll get in trouble, or myself and the head of physical security have to sign off on the contract that's being issued. Myself and sustainability have to sign off on the contract that's being issued. So we have to get that process going. So governance is very important to the procedure and laying the foundation.
Well, I'm sure they all hated you on the remote access piece because that's where we started, right?
Yeah. One of our controls vendors basically told me the first time was, you're not Boeing, you're not Northrop, you're not one of the big players. And we're like, well, but my tenants are big players, right? If something happens to the building, my tenant's gonna say, give me rent abatement, I'm not gonna pay you rent for this month, and that's millions of dollars. So I don't care if I'm not Boeing or Northrop, you're gonna follow the same standards that they're gonna run because it is an enterprise level network now that we wanna accomplish and get together.
And you mandate everyone uses the same remote access system. They can't put their own VPN in.
Every person, you can't have a VPN, it has to go through a remote access tool. There are about 400 vendors, users that are on that system. It can't be, individuals that are, Sizerco at Sizerco. It has to be somebody at Sizerco, somebody at Sunbelt, somebody at Cochrane. So it has to be an individual, not just a, rogue name there.
And then the last is, you've been moving stuff to the cloud using the SD-WAN functionality?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of access control solutions that are now going cloud-based where you no longer require a physical server to sit on site. BMS, right? We're doing a bunch of that testing now where we have rotations in the buildings. So our engineers might rotate every quarter, every 2 quarters. So we'll make it easier for them to log into a cloud environment and have them be able to manage all the buildings from there. One of the big things is actually our camera systems. We took our camera environment during the past election and we moved everything to the cloud, and we have about 4,000 cameras now going to a cloud environment through these edge devices that our security operations teams can then take a look, triage, and then deploy equipment. We have a water program, and we're talking about that later today, where our camera systems, our water detection, leak detection teams can work together. So if water is detected in the building, it then talks to the camera system, which then creates a ticket to notify engineering and security. So that saved us a ton of money on leaks and figuring out, water problems across the board. So we've been digitizing the environment quite a bit.
Cool. I know you're starting to look at running edge applications now, like using our containerized environment. I don't know if there's any ones in particular you're looking at. Or
I think for us, it's this year we finally got a head of engineering, or last year we got a head of engineering. So he's able to give us direction as to what data he wants to see. He's on an energy tour, a BMS tour, set points, auditing all of our vendors and making sure that, the proper workflows are in place, series of operations are in place. So that's what we're looking at now, tools that allow us to validate that the vendors are actually doing their work, and going back in there and saying, you said you did this, it's not there. The tool is saying that you messed up and doing some provisioning and practices there. So that's the future. Our new head of financial, our new CFO, wants to see the data, right? Because everybody now makes value of the data, and it's being used for leasing projects. So all of our tenants are now asking us, how are your buildings operating? How is that going to apply for my sustainability goals and their sustainability goals? So that's kind of the future of bringing all the data together into one location.
Awesome. What's next?
That's it.